Ohneganos, an Indigenous Water Research Program by Corley Smizer for ETEC 52161A. Indigeneity, Technology, and Education for Dr. Amber Schilling. Ohneganos is an Indigenous water research program led by McMaster University Professor Dr. Don Martin-Hill. Ohneganos reminds us that relationships are the foundation of Indigenous knowledge. The program works with community elders, youth, service workers, as well as several community organizers, collaborators, and other project partners, which can be found on their website. The purpose of their research is to investigate Indigenous water insecurity, focusing on two communities, Six Nations of the Grand River in Ontario and Lubicon Lake Band of Little Buffalo in northern Alberta. Both communities have endured generations of limited access to clean drinking water, and they are worried about the level of pollution in the water and ecosystems that their communities rely on. The research uses an innovative research framework informed by the Indigenous community partners to facilitate sharing and integration of Western science and Indigenous and local knowledges. This process of co-creation enables them to develop appropriate, place-based, sustainable solutions to the water crisis impacting partner communities and other Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. Hatcher et al. 2009 explains how two-eyed seeing refers to learning to see from one eye with the strengths of Indigenous ways of knowing and from the other eye with the strengths of Western ways of knowing, and using both of these eyes together. Two-eyed seeing intentionally and respectfully brings together our different ways of knowing to motivate people to use all our gifts so we leave the world a better place and do not compromise opportunity for our youth. Within their website is a series of youth-led podcasts called Let's Talk Water, which is hosted by Macassa Looking Horse from Six Nations of the Grand River. She speaks with inspirational Indigenous youth leaders, community members, Indigenous water protectors, researchers, artists, and knowledge holders from across the globe to share traditional ecological knowledge, discuss current events, and talk about Ohneganos research. Implementing the use of technology with my own classroom by utilizing digital storytelling through methods of creating podcasts or vodcasts is something that I would like to further explore within my own practice. Van Prague and Sanchez 2015 point out how mobile devices offer particular benefits like portability, social interactivity, context sensitivity, connectivity, and individuality. Part of their research has involved developing digital stories and making them free to use through their various social media platforms. Oral storytelling is a traditional, tried, and tested means of knowledge transmission. Digital stories assist in the collection and sharing of Indigenous knowledge because they resonate with Indigenous peoples, integrating traditional methodologies with modern technologies. Even though there are numerous advantages to including technology within education, throughout our course we have also discussed disadvantages, such as the technical capabilities of devices, the technical expertise of teachers, as well as making sure we are following correct protocols when sharing Indigenous knowledges, which can act as deterrents to technology use in the classroom context for some educators. Ohneganos is currently working on creating a digital Indigenous map of Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. This will help them illustrate the relationship between Haudenosaunee people, water, land, and well-being, and will be done so in a new and emerging digital format. Integrated with audio and video recordings, Indigenous maps help document important cultural areas for the purpose of conservation and development prevention. This is known as counter-mapping. Throughout the exploration of Ohneganos, I discovered a new resource called Terra Stories, which was built to enable Indigenous and other local communities to locate and map their own oral storytelling traditions about places of significance, meaning, or value to them. This resource would allow educators and their students to connect with their local communities. Within my own community and school district, I have seen a lack of readily available Indigenous resources for educators. The use and implementation of the tool called Terra Stories could be changing for our local nations and communities in order to pass stories and land-based practice onto our future generations, all while using the mode of technology. Terra Stories could be an excellent resource for developing land-based teachings within one's own classroom. Indigenous maps also help teach younger generations about their culture, history, and environment. The data that is mapped is usually information from hunters and gatherers, knowledge keepers, and elders, collected by listening to stories about where they have traveled, lived, hunted, and held ceremony, in both contemporary and historical contexts. Information that will be included in the Ohneganos Indigenous map may include Indigenous place names for land areas and water features, historic, sacred, or cultural sites of significance, changes in habitat and animal movement patterns, current locations of culturally and or ecologically significant plant and animal species, and Ohneganos project data. In partnership with Mohawk College, leveraging their state-of-the-art XR Innovation Studio, you can immerse yourself as you travel through time in a canoe down the Grand River, learning about traditional Haudenosaunee culture and witnessing the world around you transform. This educational tool will offer both Western science information and data, as well as Indigenous knowledge teachings for a truly co-created experience. Throughout the summer of 2020, in partnership with Six Nations Social Services, they hosted an art contest for Six Nations youth grades 6 to 12. This exhibit is called Water is Life. We asked participants to paint what water means to them, guiding by some question prompts such as, why do you think water is life? Why is water special to you? And why is it important to keep the water clean? Ohneganos have created a living resource guide which was developed by members of the co-creation team with the purpose of sparking dialogue between Indigenous researchers, community members, activists, academics, and policymakers to better improve research practices involving Indigenous communities. Current contents include indigenizing research, traditional ecological knowledge, research ethics, intellectual property, and the doctrine of discovery. There is a great need for Indigenous resource guides for educators. Sam et al. 2021 shared that Indigenous knowledge is represented through digital practices in online spaces, risk misrepresentation and appropriation, which leads to stereotypes and deficit thinking about Indigenous peoples, their histories, and their current realities. There is a need for educational approaches that give space, voice, and agency to Indigenous people. Indigenizing research involves weaving Indigenous research methodologies, knowledges, experiences, and worldviews into scientific research, that which currently privileges Western science and Euro-Western human-centered perspectives. They encourage everyone involved in scientific research with Indigenous communities to use it as a guide. Each section also includes an extensive reading list for more resources and references on these topics. From my own experiences, I think that bringing awareness forward regarding the use of technology in education to represent Indigenous people in their communities is something that is needed for our youth. As an adult, I have had to go back and do the hard work in order to claim my indigeneity, often through the use of technology, and as an educator, I am able to use the two-eyed seeing approach within my own practice. Always remember that water is life.